I came home early. My sister-in-law was in my bed, with my husband. I froze. Then I turned and walked out. He ran after me, panicking. Wait, I messed up. It won't happen again. I said nothing because what I did next, he never saw coming. I remember the sound first, the low hum of the dishwasher, steady and indifferent, as if nothing inside that house had changed. It was a Thursday night, a little after 8. I had left work early because the clinic was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you feel unnecessary. I stopped for gas-skipped dinner and drove home thinking only about a shower and silence. The porch light was on. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the extra pair of shoes by the door, women's flats, beige, not mine. For a moment I stood there with my keys still in my hand, turning over the possibilities in a calm, almost clinical way. A neighbor, maybe. My sister-in-law, Rebecca, had been staying with us on and off since her separation. She sometimes came by without texting first. Sometimes brought wine, sometimes brought opinions. I opened the door. The house smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and something else perfumed sweet and out of place. The television in the living room was muted, casting blue light across the walls. No voices, no laughter. Just the hum of appliances and the soft creak of the floor under my shoes. I walked past the kitchen, past the island where I had signed the refinance papers 2 years ago. My name, first. Mine, the larger income mine, the steadier credit history. It had been a practical decision. Ethan, my husband, had agreed at the time without much thought, smiling in that easy way of his, grateful to be carried by a system that rarely asked him to account for anything. The hallway light was off. The bedroom door was half closed. I pushed it open. For a second, nothing made sense. Not the shapes, not the colors, not the rhythm of movement that stopped too late. Then the details aligned: Rebecca's hair against my pillow, her blouse unbuttoned, Ethan turning one hand still at his waistband, eyes widening in a way that was almost theatrical. No one spoke. I felt my body go very still, as if something inside me had decided to conserve energy. There was no heat, no surge of anger, no dramatic fracture, just a clean, cold separation between what I was seeing and what I was going to do. I turned. I walked out. Claire, wait. His voice came from behind me, already strained, already reaching for explanations he hadn't yet formed. It's not, please, just... I didn't stop. I moved down the hallway past the framed photos, our wedding, his parents' anniversary, a Christmas card we had never sent, and into the living room. My purse was on the chair where I'd left it that morning. I picked it up, checked for my phone, my keys, my wallet, as if I were leaving for any ordinary errand. Claire. He was closer now, breath uneven, footsteps quick. I messed up. I know how it looks, just let me explain. I opened the front door. It won't happen again. He said the words rushing over each other. I swear, it didn't mean anything. Rebecca, I stepped onto the porch. He followed me out barefoot, the night air cool against the bare skin of his arms. Please, don't go like this. I looked at him then, not with anger, not even with disappointment, but with a kind of quiet attention, as if I were seeing him clearly for the first time. There was fear in his face, yes, but also something else, a reflex, a habit of minimizing, of smoothing things over before they could become real. I messed up, he repeated softer now, as if volume might make it truer. I nodded once, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement, the way you might nod at a stranger who has said something irrelevant. Then I got in my car. He stood there, one hand lifted, as if he might still stop me. He didn't. The engine turned over. The headlights cut across the lawn over the mailbox with our shared last name painted in careful black letters. I drove. At the first red light, my hands began to shake. Not violently, just a tremor, small and persistent. I placed them flat against the steering wheel, feeling the texture under my palms, grounding myself in something solid. There was a time when I would have called someone. My mother, maybe. A friend from college. anyone who could absorb the shock and tell me what I was feeling. But that night, I didn't reach for my phone. I let the silence sit heavy and undisturbed. I checked into a hotel off the interstate, clean, anonymous, the kind of place that smelled faintly of bleach and industrial air freshener. The front desk clerk didn't ask questions. He handed me a key card and a receipt, his expression practiced and neutral. In the room, I set my bag on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed. The television remote lay where someone had left it, angled slightly toward the pillows. I didn't turn it on. My phone buzzed. "Ethan, please talk to me. Ethan. This isn't what you think. Ethan, Rebecca is leaving. I told her to go. Ethan. Where are you?" I read the messages once, then set the phone face down. A few minutes later, another message. "Ethan, I'm sorry." That one stayed on the screen a little longer. Not because it mattered, but because it was simple, unadorned, closer to the truth than the rest. Still, it didn't change anything. Apologies, I had learned over the years, were often just a way of asking for time. And time in that moment was the only thing I wasn't willing to give. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The air conditioning unit rattled softly, cycling on and off. Somewhere down the hall, a door closed. Footsteps passed, then faded. I began to think, not in fragments, not in emotional bursts, but in sequences. What needed to be done? What could be secured? What had already been compromised? The house was in my name. The primary account was joint, but the majority of the deposits, my deposits, were traceable. The retirement fund, the insurance policies, the credit cards. There was a structure to all of it, a system that could be examined, adjusted, protected. I sat up. My phone was still on the dresser, dark screen reflecting a faint outline of my face. I picked it up, opened a new message, not to Ethan, but to someone whose number I had saved years ago and never used. Laura Simmons, Family Law. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard for a moment, then moved. "Hi, Laura. This is Claire Bennett. We met briefly at the Henderson fundraiser last year. I need to schedule a consultation as soon as possible. It's urgent." I read the message once, checking for tone, for clarity. No excess, no explanation. I sent it. The room felt different after that. Not warmer, not safer, but more defined, as if the edges of things had sharpened. The shock was still there, somewhere beneath the surface, but it no longer controlled the direction of my thoughts. My phone buzzed again, this time with a response. "Claire, I'm available tomorrow morning at 9. Can you come by the office?" I typed back, "Yes, thank you." I set the phone down and lay back again, my mind already moving ahead. Documents, accounts, conversations that would need to happen, decisions that would need to be made. Outside, a car passed on the highway, its headlights briefly illuminating the curtains before fading into darkness. I closed my eyes. For the first time since I had opened that bedroom door, I felt something settle inside me. Not forgiveness, not even acceptance, but a quiet, deliberate resolve. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't asked for explanations. And I wasn't going to. By the time I walked into Laura Simmons's office the next morning, I wasn't thinking about what I had seen. I was thinking about what it meant. The building was in a quiet part of town, brick exterior, clean glass doors, the kind of place that signaled stability without trying too hard. Inside, everything was orderly, neutral walls, framed degrees, a receptionist who greeted me by name, as if I had already crossed some invisible line from uncertainty into decision. "Claire," Laura said when she stepped out to meet me, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, her expression composed. "Come in." Her office overlooked a small parking lot and a row of trees just beginning to turn. She gestured for me to sit, then closed the door behind us. "I'm sorry you're here under these circumstances," she said, not unkindly, "but I'm glad you came in quickly. Timing matters." I nodded. I didn't want to wait. "Good." She took a seat across from me, opened a folder, and clicked her pen once. "Start from the beginning, but keep it factual. We'll get to the emotional part later." So I did. I told her what I had seen. I told her who Rebecca was, my sister-in-law, technically still married to Ethan's older brother, though they had been separated for months. I explained how she had been drifting in and out of our house during that time, sometimes staying overnight, sometimes leaving in the early morning with vague explanations and a distracted smile. Laura listened without interrupting, only making occasional notes. Any prior suspicions, she asked when I finished. Yes, I said after a brief pause, but nothing I could prove. What kind of suspicions? Changes in behavior, I said. Ethan working late more often. Rebecca being around too much. Conversations that stopped when I walked into a room. Laura nodded. That's common. It rarely starts suddenly. It just becomes visible all at once. I let that sit for a moment. What I need to know, she continued, is your financial and legal position. That's where your leverage is. I had expected that question. The house is in my name, I said. Purchased before we were married. Refinanced 2 years ago, still solely under me. Good, she said, making a note. Mortgage. Paid on time, from my account. Joint accounts. One main checking account, I said, but most of the deposits are mine. My salary goes in there. He contributes, but inconsistently. Retirement accounts. Separate, mine is significantly larger. Any large recent withdrawals, transfers? I hesitated. I'm not sure. I haven't checked in detail yet. Do that today, she said. Immediately after you leave here. Look for anything unusual. Cash withdrawals, transfers to unknown accounts, increased spending patterns. People who are already crossing one line tend to cross others. I nodded again, more firmly this time. Now, she said, leaning back slightly, we talk about strategy. The word landed with a quiet weight. You have options, she continued, but the most important thing right now is control. Emotional control, financial control, legal control. You've already taken the first step by leaving the house without confrontation. That gives you time. Time. Ethan had asked for it last night, as if it were something I could hand over casually, like an extra set of keys. File first, Laura said. It matters. It sets the tone. It shows intent. And it prevents him from getting ahead of you legally. Will it be complicated? I asked. That depends on how he responds, she said. But based on what you've told me, you're in a strong position. The house is yours. Your income is stable. There are no children involved. I exhaled slowly. I hadn't realized I had been holding my breath. What about her? I asked. Rebecca. Laura's expression didn't change. Legally, she's irrelevant. Morally, that's a different conversation. But the court doesn't care about that part as much as people think. I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it was so precise. What do I do next? I asked. Today, she said. You go home when you know they're not there. You gather your documents, tax returns, bank statements, mortgage paperwork, anything tied to assets. You secure your personal accounts. Change passwords. If you have shared credit cards, consider freezing them. And him, I asked. Do I talk to him? Not yet, she said. Not until you've protected yourself. Right now, anything you say will be used to negotiate, to minimize, to delay. You don't owe him that. That more than anything else she had said settled something in me. You don't owe him that. When I left her office, the air outside felt sharper, clearer. I sat in my car for a moment, reviewing everything we had discussed, not as a victim replaying events, but as someone preparing for a process. My phone buzzed. Ethan. I didn't sleep. Please just tell me where you are. Ethan, Rebecca is gone. I told her not to come back. Ethan. We need to talk. I read the messages, then opened my banking app. The numbers appeared on the screen, familiar and structured balances, transactions dates. For a moment, everything looked normal. Then I scrolled. 3 days ago, a transfer I didn't recognize. 2 weeks ago, a series of withdrawals small enough to go unnoticed but consistent. A payment to an account I didn't know. I felt something shift, Not anger, not even betrayal, but confirmation. Laura had been right. This wasn't a single mistake, it was a pattern. I took screenshots, saved them, organized them into a folder. Then I logged into the account settings and changed the password. I enabled two-factor authentication. I checked the credit cards, same pattern, small charges, unfamiliar locations. Each step was methodical, deliberate. By early afternoon, I was parked a block away from my house. The street looked the same, quiet, orderly, neighbors going about their routines. Nothing in the outside world reflected what had happened inside those walls. I waited until I saw Ethan's car pull out of the driveway. He didn't look toward the street. He didn't see me. I counted to 30. Then I drove up. The front door was unlocked. Inside the house felt different, not because anything had changed physically, but because I was seeing it without the layer of assumption I had carried for years. The furniture, the photos, the carefully chosen details, they all felt like evidence now, not comfort. I moved quickly. Documents, first file cabinet in the study top drawer. Tax returns, mortgage papers, insurance policies. I placed them in a folder, then in my bag. Bedroom next. The bed was made. That detail, so small, so deliberate, almost stopped me, as if neatness could erase what had happened there. I didn't let it. I opened my closet, pulled out a suitcase, and began to pack clothes, essentials, nothing sentimental. I wasn't leaving my life. I was relocating it. My phone buzzed again. "Ethan, I'm coming home early. Please don't leave." I looked at the message, then at the room around me. I zipped the suitcase. For the first time since the night before, I spoke out loud, though no one was there to hear it. "You're already too late." I picked up my bag, my documents, and walked out of the house. I didn't lock the door behind me. By the time Ethan realized what I was doing, it was already underway. That was the advantage of silence. It didn't announce itself, didn't ask permission, didn't invite negotiation. It moved quietly, step by step, until the structure of things had shifted beneath your feet. I spent the next 48 hours in motion. Not emotionally, logistically. Laura filed the petition first thing the next morning. Irreconcilable differences, clean, neutral language for something that had been anything but. She attached a request for temporary orders, exclusive use of the house financial protections, and a formal notice preventing asset dissipation. File first, control the pace, she had said. And we did. While the paperwork moved through the system, I built the perimeter of my life. I opened a new checking account in my name, only at a different bank. I transferred my next paycheck there, updated direct deposits, and rerouted automatic payments. Utilities, insurance. My car note, everything that could be separated, was separated. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. The joint account remained for now, but it no longer anchored me. I pulled my credit reports from all 3 bureaus, set fraud alerts, and placed a temporary freeze. It felt excessive, almost paranoid, but Laura had insisted. "People don't think clearly when they're losing control," she said. "Protect yourself from decisions he might make out of panic." Panic. I saw it in his messages. "Please don't do this. We can fix it. I'll do anything. Just talk to me." I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because every word I gave him would become a thread he could pull on, something to delay, to soften, to reshape the narrative. And I wasn't interested in narratives anymore. I was interested in outcomes. On Saturday morning, I met Laura again. This time we went through everything in detail: the accounts, the transfers I had found, the documentation I had gathered. She studied the screenshots, her expression sharpening slightly. "These withdrawals," she said, tapping the page. "They're patterned. Small enough to avoid attention, consistent enough to indicate intent." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we include it," she said. "Not as an accusation, but as a fact. It strengthens your position, shows financial inconsistency on his side." "And Rebecca?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Still irrelevant legally," she said. "But if she's been receiving any of these funds directly or indirectly, that could matter." "Do you have proof?" "Not yet." Then we don't speculate, she said. We stay precise. Precision. It was becoming a kind of language one I understood instinctively. By the time I left her office, the next steps were clear. Service would happen Monday. He would be formally notified, no ambiguity, no room for reinterpretation. The system would take over where emotion had no place. That afternoon, I went back to the house one last time. Not to gather anything I had already taken what mattered, but to stand in the space without urgency, without shock. Ethan's car was in the driveway. I paused for a moment, considering whether to turn around to avoid the confrontation Laura had warned me about. But something in me resisted that this was still my house, my space, my decision. I stepped inside. He was in the kitchen, standing by the counter, phone in hand. When he saw me, he froze in a way that mirrored the night before, but this time there was no confusion in it, only anticipation. "Claire," he said, his voice low, cautious. "Thank God. I didn't know if you were—" "I'm here for a few minutes," I said, setting my keys on the counter. "That's all." He nodded quickly, as if agreeing might keep me from leaving again. Okay, that's fine." There was a moment of silence stretched thin by everything unsaid. "I've been trying to reach you," he said finally. I need to explain." I looked at him, not unkindly but without invitation. "You've had time," I said. "You can explain to your lawyer." The word landed between us, lawyer, solid, immovable. His expression shifted, confusion giving way to something sharper. "What do you mean?" he asked. "You'll find out on Monday," I said. "Claire, what are you doing?" His voice rose slightly, edged with something close to fear. "This is insane. We haven't even talked about it." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "That's not true," he said quickly. "People make mistakes. We work through them. That's what marriage is." I let that sit for a moment. "Marriage is also trust," I said, "and respect, and boundaries." "I know," he said, stepping closer. "I broke that. I get it. But that doesn't mean we just throw everything away." "Everything?" "The house, the accounts, the years." He was still thinking in terms of loss, what he might lose, what could be salvaged. I was thinking in terms of alignment, what already no longer fit. "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "I'm putting things back where they belong." He stared at me, searching for something, anger maybe, or hesitation. He didn't find it. "What about Rebecca?" he asked suddenly, as if saying her name might force a different outcome. "What about her?" I said. It wasn't serious." He said the words coming faster now. "She's going through a lot. It happened." "It happened," I repeated, not as a question. He nodded almost eagerly, as if agreement might soften the edges. "Yes, exactly. It was a mistake." I held his gaze. "Then you'll have to live with it," I said. For a moment he didn't move. Then his shoulders dropped slightly, the first visible crack in the structure he had been trying to maintain. "Claire," he said quietly, "please." There it was again, the request, the attempt to draw me back into a conversation that no longer existed. I picked up my keys. "I'll be out of your way soon," I said. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice tightening again. "It means," I said, pausing at the door, "this won't be your problem for much longer." I stepped outside before he could respond. Behind me, I heard the door open, his footsteps quick, uncertain. "Claire, wait." I didn't turn around. On Monday at 10:17 a.m. he was served. I wasn't there to see it. But I didn't need to be. Because by then everything that mattered had already been set in motion. The call came at 10:42 a.m. I was sitting at my desk, a chart open on my screen, cursor blinking in a space where I hadn't typed anything in several minutes. The clinic moved around me. Phones ringing, footsteps in the hallway, the quiet rhythm of a normal Monday. But I was somewhere else, entirely suspended between what had already happened and what was about to. My phone vibrated once. "Ethan!" I let it ring. It stopped, then started again. I turned the phone face down and went back to the chart. 2 lines in it buzzed again, then again, then again, the pattern becoming insistent, almost frantic. At 10:47 it stopped. At 10:49, a message came through. What did you do? I read it once, then locked the screen. At 11:03, Laura called. He's been served, she said, her tone measured professional. Initial reaction was predictable. He was surprised, upset, asked a lot of questions. I'm sure he did, I said. He'll have counsel by the end of the day, she continued. That's standard. In the meantime, we proceed as planned. Temporary orders hearing is set for next week. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay. Claire, she added, her voice softening slightly. This is where things can get messy, not legally but personally. He may try to contact you more aggressively. Family members might get involved. Stay consistent. No direct engagement. I understand. And one more thing, she said. We've requested exclusive use of the house effective immediately upon temporary orders. Given the title structure, we have a strong case. A strong case. I ended the call and sat for a moment, letting the words settle. Across the room, someone laughed, light, unburdened, completely disconnected from the shift that had just taken place in my life. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Ethan. It was his mother. I stared at the name for a second, then let it ring. A voicemail followed almost immediately. I didn't listen to it. Instead, I opened my calendar and blocked out the next few days' appointments, meetings, anything that would anchor me in routine. Structure mattered. It kept everything from collapsing into reaction. At noon, I took my lunch break outside. The air was crisp, the sky a flat, uninterrupted blue. People moved past me, some in scrubs, some in business clothes, all of them carrying on with lives that hadn't been interrupted. I sat on a bench and finally listened to the voicemail. Claire. His mother's voice began tight with emotion. I don't know what's going on, but Ethan just called us. He's very upset. He said you filed for divorce without even talking to him. That's not how families handle things. I paused the message. That's not how families handle things. I let the phrase sit there, examining it the way I had examined everything else over the past few days, not for its emotional weight, but for its structure, its assumptions. Then I pressed play. You need to come over, she continued. We need to sit down and talk this through. Rebecca is here, and well, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Call me back as soon as you get this. A misunderstanding. I ended the message. For a brief moment, I considered responding, not to defend myself, not to explain, but simply to correct the language, to replace misunderstanding with something more accurate. But accuracy wasn't the point of that message. Control was. I stood up, brushed my hands against my coat, and went back inside. By the time I got home that evening to the apartment I had rented for the month, there were 12 missed calls on my phone. 8 from Ethan. 2 from his mother, 1 from his brother, and 1 from an unknown number. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my laptop and reviewed the documents Laura had sent over, drafts of the filings notes on the upcoming hearing, a list of items I would need to provide. Everything was precise, structured, forward-moving. There was no space in it for debate. On Wednesday, Ethan showed up at the clinic. I saw him through the glass doors before he saw me standing just inside the entrance, scanning the room, his posture tight with urgency. For a moment, I considered asking the front desk to turn him away. Then I didn't. I stepped into the hallway. He saw me immediately. Claire, he said, moving toward me, relief flashing across his face. Finally. I've been trying to. You shouldn't be here, I said, keeping my voice even. I didn't know where else to go, he said. You won't answer your phone. Your email's nothing. That was intentional, I said. He stopped a few feet away, as if an invisible line had been drawn between us. This is insane, he said, lowering his voice but not his intensity. You filed for divorce over one mistake. 1. I looked at him. It wasn't one, I said. He shook his head quickly. Okay, fine. More than 1. But that's not the point. The point is, we fix it. That's what people do. People also take responsibility, I said. I am, he insisted. I told you I messed up. I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes. Then start by accepting what's happening, I said. His expression tightened. What's happening is you're overreacting. There it was. Not remorse, not understanding. Minimization. I'm responding, I said, appropriately. To what he asked, frustration breaking through now. To something that's already over, Rebecca is gone. I told her to leave. I cut it off. I held his gaze. You didn't cut it off, I said. You got caught. The words landed harder than I expected, not because they were harsh, but because they were exact. He flinched. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he exhaled long and uneven. Claire, he said, quieter now, we have a life. A home. You can't just erase that. I'm not erasing anything I said. I'm separating it. Same difference, he muttered. No, I said, it's not. He looked at me, then really looked as if trying to reconcile the person standing in front of him with the one he thought he knew. This isn't you, he said finally. I almost smiled. This is exactly me, I said. You just never had to see it before. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Around us, the clinic moved, people passing, conversations happening, life continuing in a way that felt almost surreal against the stillness of that moment. Please, he said one last time. I shook my head. You'll hear from my lawyer, I said. Then I turned and walked back down the hallway. I didn't look back. By Friday, the narrative had spread through his family, versions of it at least. I heard about it secondhand, through a mutual friend who called to check in, her voice careful, her questions indirect. They're saying you're being cold, she said. That you won't even talk to him. I am being cold, I said. That's the point. There was a pause on the other end. Well, she said slowly, they didn't expect that. I did. Because for years I had been the one who smoothed things over, who absorbed tension, who made space for other people's mistakes. Now I wasn't. And that, more than the divorce, more than the legal filings, more than the loss of the house, they thought they had a claim to, was what unsettled them. Not the consequence. The change. The hearing lasted less than 40 minutes. It took longer to park than it did to establish what had already been true from the beginning. We sat across from each other in a small courtroom, neutral walls, polished wood, a judge who had seen versions of this story more times than either of us could count. Laura handled most of the speaking. I answered when asked, kept my tone measured, my words precise. Ethan had hired a lawyer. Younger than Laura, sharper in tone but less grounded, he tried to frame the situation as emotional overreaction, marital strain, temporary lapse, a chance for reconciliation. The judge didn't entertain it. Let's stay with the facts, she said, glancing down at the file. Property, title, financial contributions, and the request for temporary orders. Facts. The house was in my name. The mortgage had been paid from my account. The documentation of inconsistent financial behavior on Ethan's part had been submitted. There was no argument there, only resistance. I just need time, Ethan said at one point, his voice breaking slightly. To fix things. To make this right. The judge looked at him not unkindly but without indulgence. Mr. Bennett, she said, this court isn't here to repair relationships. It's here to resolve legal matters. The distinction settled the room. Temporary orders were granted. Exclusive use of the house mine. Financial protections enforced. A schedule for the next step set. It was in every sense procedural. And yet, as we stood to leave, I could feel the weight of it, not as triumph, not as relief, but as finality. Outside the courthouse, Ethan caught up to me. Claire, please. I stopped. Not because I had anything left to say, but because I didn't want this moment to follow me indefinitely. Some things needed to end cleanly. He stood a few feet away, his shoulders slumped, his expression stripped of the urgency that had defined him for the past week. I didn't think it would go this far, he said. I nodded once. I know. I thought. He hesitated, searching for something that would still hold. I thought we had more time. Time. The same word again. You did, I said. You just didn't use it. He looked down at the ground, then back at me. Is there anything I can do? He asked. The question was genuine this time, not a tactic, not a delay. I considered it. Be honest, I said, with yourself at least. He let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and an exhale. That's it. That's all that's left, I said. There was a pause. Then he nodded once slowly, as if acknowledging something he couldn't yet fully understand. Okay, he said. I turned and walked away. The house felt different when I returned. Not empty, just quieter, more defined. The air carried the same faint scent of citrus cleaner, the same soft hum of appliances, but without the underlying tension I hadn't realized had been there. I set my keys on the counter in the same place I had always set them. For a moment I stood in the kitchen looking around, not at what had happened, but at what remained. The walls, the structure, the life I had built piece by piece long before it had been shared. I moved through the rooms slowly. The living room unchanged except for the absence of noise. The study files, neatly stacked documents now organized in a way that reflected reality, not assumption. The bedroom. I paused at the doorway. Then I walked in. The bed was made as it had been before. The same sheets, the same arrangement. I stripped them. Not out of anger, not as a symbolic act, but because it was practical, necessary. I replaced them with a new set, clean, unmarked, neutral. When I was done, the room looked exactly the same. But it wasn't. The weeks that followed were quiet. Not easy, but steady. There were meetings, documents, conversations that stayed within the boundaries Laura had set. There were moments of fatigue, of reflection, of the kind of clarity that comes only after something has been fully broken and examined. Ethan moved out. Rebecca disappeared from the narrative entirely, not because anything had been resolved, but because she no longer had a place in it. His family reached out a few times, less frequently, less insistently. The language shifted from accusation to distance, from certainty to uncertainty. I didn't engage. Not out of resentment. Out of alignment. One afternoon, about a month later, I ran into a mutual acquaintance at the grocery store. I heard what happened, she said carefully. I wanted to say I admire how you handled it. I smiled, small, polite. I didn't handle it, I said. I responded to it. She nodded, as if understanding, though I wasn't sure she did. As I walked away, I thought about the difference. Handling something implies control over the event itself. Responding acknowledges that the event has already occurred and that what matters is what you do next. The divorce finalized without drama. No drawn-out battles, no last-minute revelations, just paperwork signatures and the quiet closing of a chapter that had already ended long before the court recognized it. On the morning it became official, I woke up early. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The house was still, the kind of stillness that feels earned rather than imposed. Light filtered through the windows, soft and even touching the edges of things without demanding attention. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and for the first time in a long while, there was nothing pressing against me, no unresolved tension, no waiting for the next message, the next